Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Child Please Podcast. I am Regina Weathersby,
And I'm Erica Simpson.
and we are the Blue Rose Foundation. So, this month is what month?
Pregnancy and infant loss awareness.
Yes, so October acknowledges pregnancy and infancy loss. You see, I got on my pink and blue. That's the colors for that ribbon, just to bring awareness to that issue that unfortunately too many people experience. And so, Erica, we have a special person here with us today. Yes. So I'm going to let you introduce who we have that's going to be sharing with us today. Who we got?
Okay, today we have Dr. Felicia Owens.
Okay, doctor.
She's an audiologist with neonatal background, and we're going to let her tell us her story.
Welcome, Felicia.
Well, thank
Dr.
you.
Felicia.
Thank y'all for having me. I am an audiologist by trade. I primarily work with the neonates, and I do see some adult consults, but the majority of my time is spent with the babies. I guess my experience with infertility, I would say, and pregnancy losses started back in 2009 when my husband and I experienced our first ectopic pregnancy. The pregnancy ruptured. I was bleeding internally, had no idea I was pregnant, and ended up having to do emergency surgery to remove the excess fluid buildup around my lungs and liver and the internal bleeding, and then also to remove any of the ruptured pregnancy. And so that was our first experience with pregnancy loss. And then we got pregnant again. This time my OBGYN suggested that I allow for extra monitoring during that time to make sure that the pregnancy or that the embryo moved into the right spot and not get trapped like it did the first time. Mm-hmm. And unbeknownst to us, it happened again. And so that was April of 2010, and we experienced our second ectopic pregnancy. And this time we were able to see the heartbeat. We were able to see that we were able to get pregnant, but unfortunately it turned into another ectopic pregnancy. And so we ended up having to do another surgery to remove the pregnancy in the second fallopian tube. And so my only options to conceive were IVF. That was our only way of having our own children. And so that begins our fertility journey through IVF. So that's where we started.
Okay. So from 2010, so when did you have your first baby?
So we went through a little drought. My husband and I was just finishing up my doctorate in 2010, and we just decided that we were going to take a hiatus from children. We were going to focus on us and marriage and figure out like what we were going to do. And so we then started looking into fertility treatment around 2013. And so we started our first IVF journey in 2013. We went through the whole process of egg retrieval, embryo counting, everything. And I want to say maybe the fall of 2013, of course, we experienced multiple failed attempts to get pregnant. And it wasn't until 2018 when after our second round of IVF, and when I say second round, it was the first round using up all the eggs there, and then the second round was a fresh batch of eggs, and that's when we got pregnant the second time in 2018. So, and we were successful after 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 retrieving the eggs and then doing a frozen transfer, basically. And so we had our son, which was multiples. We were transferred 2 eggs, and we ended up only one successfully survived, and we ended up having our son in April of 2019, April 12th, 2019. So that's our story for the most part.
So almost a 10-year span of loss. Mm-hmm. And
yes.
And let's just kind of stop and talk about that, because a lot of times when we hear pregnancy loss, like you said, you didn't even know you were pregnant, but you have to still continue to go on about your day. You still have life. And I don't think sometimes people consider the strain that puts on a marriage.
It does. I will, when you say going on throughout life, I will go back to the ectopic pregnancies. During that time, in 2010, when I started my full-time jobs and working, and then we started to try again with try IVF around 2013, I was then starting to be engulfed in the baby world. So I'm trying to test these babies in these rooms with these mamas who are just so excited about having a newborn. Oh, I've had 3 babies. And so I'm going into these rooms and trying to put on a brave smile. That's 13 rooms I may see in a day, or 13 babies. And after experiencing the pregnancy losses, there would be sometimes I would come out of each room and I'm just crying my eyes out. And then I'm gathering myself to go back to the next room. And then there would be times when I would enter into the room with parents who were not trying to get pregnant, or there were moms this is my 10th child, and they weren't wanting another baby. And so those wave of emotions and experiences that I experienced during being a newborn hearing screener, it's up and down, up and down. And that did take a toll on my relationship with my husband. The ache for a child, the desire of wanting to have a child, and the pressure that my husband was feeling with me, the desire of wanting to have a child, it really did take a toll on us and how we communicated with each other, and whether we wanted to pursue more children or not pursue children, or did we want to go the adoption route, or just not have any children at all. And so those, it was a lot of journaling, a lot of counseling, a lot of really some raw talks with the husband, and with counseling, and with myself, as to whether I wanted to continue to even try to pursue having children. So
I remember one time you and I were talking, and you made mention. So that's work, and like I said, we have to go to work. That's how you feed yourself and your potential family. So you have the pressure at work. It's not really intentional pressure. I mean, it's work. And then, but I remember this conversation you and I had, and you talked about you went to a family function, and a family member asked you when you gonna have a baby. Let's talk about that.
So some people just don't know what to say, and
they don't, baby, they don't.
And it's not necessarily family members, as it could just be family friends. And I think at this particular time it was a family friend. My nieces are having babies.
So we great auntie at this point.
We are. They're young, and they're having children, and not planned per se, but they're having children. And as I call it, the old-fashioned way. And I'm over here struggling just to conceive fertility treatment way. And so I'm battling with this, trying to be happy for my niece, be at the baby shower. And there's an old church member that was standing behind me in the line to get her food, and she brings up the conversation about wanting, when are you going to have children? And and I had to stop her and tell her, first off, we've been trying. It's not like we haven't been trying, but it just, it'll happen when it happens, and when the Lord decides for it to happen. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I can't remember my exact words with her, but it was enough to the point where she stopped asking. I think she got the point across, my point across of those are not conversations, or not um, questions that you should ask people when you don't know their story. And then when I was explaining to her our story, her response, I do remember her response was, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." And that was all that she could basically afford to me at that time. And so when I left I do remember when I left the baby shower, I was kind of upset. And but the Lord just reminded me that in due time it will happen. When it's your time, it will happen. And it did. So but we do have those conversations with family members, and I still do, even after having my one child. The conversation or the question still comes up, and I'm 44, and they're asking, when are you going to give your boy another a sister? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to give him. We're thankful for what we have, and we, and then I have to bring up the conversation again of, we tried IVF again after my son, and I don't mind sharing my testimony with people, but at the same time, it some conversations don't need to be asked or brought up if it shouldn't, if I didn't bring it up. But then I'm back at explaining, no, we tried IVF again, and it was not successful. And so now we're dealing with that painful experience again, explaining to people why we are not giving our son a sibling. So and the Lord has given us wisdom on how to deal with those conversations as they come. And so through each unsuccessful pregnancy comes some peace and grace that I can bestow to others when I'm talking about my pregnancy loss, pregnancy losses. And with that, it allows me to be able to kind of testify or give my testimony to the mothers that are in the NICU at the time, that are going through some type of fertility or premature babies or things like that, that's related to pregnancy and infancy loss, and they're now having to deal with a premature baby, and all the emotions that come along with that. So
I think there are some questions. I don't think that it's an intentional. I'm asking this question because I'm trying to. Sometimes people just want to know, but our foundation is all about education, right? And so a part of the education in this moment for me is let's just stop asking people, when they're going to have kids, because there are so many different scenarios that can be a part of somebody's reality about why they don't have kids or why you don't see the kids that they've had. You know what I'm saying? So for me, after the first pregnancy, before Nadia, if someone asked me when I was gonna have kids, I had kids.
Absolutely.
I had to bury them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then you don't really want to be able to have that conversation with me, and it creates just an uncomfortable space. But then I think it's also unfair to the person you're asking the question to, because you're kind of forcing them to. It's triggering because it brings back up something that in that moment it might not be something that they're in a space to talk about or want to talk about. And I think sometimes people then feel an obligation to, it's like you're having to explain yourself. But if you're asking me a question and I feel like I have to explain myself, then along with that, there comes a certain amount of guilt that you feel, because like it feels like it's your fault and you're having to explain it. And so I think that it's just so important. I know that's a question that comes up all the time. When you see people get married, the next thing people say is, when y'all gonna have, but you can't even get out the wedding reception good, before people are asking that question, or people just kind of look at you and think, okay, when you get to a certain age, so when are you thinking about having a baby? Well, some people don't want to have kids. Some people can't have kids for medical reasons. Some people have had multiple miscarriages. Some people have had kids that were stillborn. Some people have had kids and then they may have had their child for several months and then something happened and the child passed away. We don't know. And so I want to say mind your business. That's what I felt right then. But give people grace. You know what I mean? Like some things you don't have to know. You don't have to know when somebody plans to that's a very personal decision that people make about if they're going to have a child or not, or the circumstances around that. And people shouldn't be put in a situation where they have to explain that or justify it.
And I think that, like you said, going back to the education part of it all, for those of us who experience pregnancy loss, infancy loss, even fertility loss, we have gone through those stages. We've gone through researching and, we've gone through the education part of what is going on with that. And so we're more empathetic or more sensitive to know, well, maybe that's a question that I shouldn't ask.
Absolutely.
Whereas someone who's had 3 children already and they just know you as Felicia, little old Felicia, and they only see my one child, they feel like it's okay to ask, oh, when are you going to give them another sibling? And I have, because I've been engrossed in the medical world with the babies, and I've learned how to navigate that area so much that, as I sit here and think about it, I've laughed it off. And oh no, he is more than enough. I don't need any more babies. But in actuality, my thought life is like, I would have loved to have given him another child, a sibling. I would have loved if that second, as I sit here and think, I would have loved if that second baby had stuck, and we were to have given him another one. In fact, our last embryo that we have that's in freezer now is a girl. I know it's a girl. how I would love to carry that baby for him, but I just don't know if that's what the Lord is leading us to do, and I don't feel led to do that right now. And but all that to say that those of us, like I said, have been engulfed in this area of fertility and infertility and pregnancy loss. We're more sensitive to know when and where and how and why to ask those questions, whereas others are not. And it behooves us to really educate them. And if it's offensive, like I've had to confront family members that have told me prior to having my son that we might not have any children, and I've had to confront them to explain to them what they said was extremely hurtful, knowing that I know I might not be able to have any children, but this is how it made me feel, and that took a lot of education on my end to say that, but then also bravery to say that, so that they'll know that maybe next time they won't talk to me about pregnancy or when are we going to have another child, because they know where I am mentally about wanting a child. So and especially in the Black culture, we tend to think that we could just word vomit anything because that's my girl, that's my guy, that's and everybody is just so friendly in that way. I've known him or her for 15 years. I can ask her, when you're going to have children? I done had 3. No, that's not something that we should bring up if I'm not ready to talk about that.
But you talk about the culture piece. I remember, and I can't have any more. And before I go to the culture piece, I'm gonna say this: when you have to defend having any more, like you said, each ectopic pregnancy that you had to go under surgery. So, like, it's not that you're struggling emotionally to have another one. Like at 44, and you've already been cut on multiple times, like that can mean life or death for you. So, you have to look at that piece as well. But back to the culture piece, I remember before I had Marley, and I think me and you both are from a small town. I would dread going home. I would dread going home, not to my parents' house, but to church. I would dread going to church, whether that's a wedding at a church, whether it's a funeral at a church, or a family reunion. I dread it because it came with those questions. And it's like our community, small town, a lot of people aren't even aware or even understand the depth of IVF infertility treatment. Even before we even get to the point of having a baby, like retrieving eggs, you're put to sleep.
You're poked and prodded.
Yeah, you put to sleep, and after they retrieve eggs, I remember the batch of eggs they retrieved with Marley, I bled and cramped so bad, and I was just sick. And I remember I ended up going to a birthday party, and I had promised the person I was going, but I was sick. And I bled so heavy afterwards. Like you said, they're poking and prodding on your ovaries, on your uterus and stuff. And so, and like I said, but I think the cultural piece, and I don't think people mean harm. Most people don't. It's not malicious, but it would make like the pit of my stomach. I would just get sick because I'm like, here we go with the questions. Like I got married a little later, so okay, I finally handled that. When you gonna get married? When you and that boy gonna get married? Okay, we got married, but we weren't even married a year. When y'all gonna have kids? And like it just made me cringe.
Yeah. It's the sting of those questions. And you going back to the you talk about retrieval. I remember my first my first time going through IVF, and the medication is monitored, and they're monitoring how many eggs you are producing and ovulating. And there's this thing called ovarian hyperstimulation. And my girlfriend and I, we have gone through similar stories. And she experienced ovarian hyperstimulation, and when I talked with the doctor about it, his first response was, "Oh, that happens to one in a million cases, whatnot. It's not going to happen to you." Sure enough, the ovarian hyperstimulation happens when your body produces an excess of fluid after the eggs are retrieved, and so you're now bloated and feel edemic in your abdomen area, and to the point where if your body doesn't excrete that fluid off of you, you can end up having to go back under surgery for them to remove that fluid. And unfortunately, and so I did not have to do that, but I remember that was one of the risk factors of going through IVF. And needless to say, I had about 14 eggs or so in that batch, and none of the pregnancy, none of the the frozen transfers, none of the fresh transfers, none of them were successful. And on my last egg, embryo that was frozen, I prayed and I prayed and I asked the Lord, let this baby stick. And sure enough, it didn't stick. And so going through that first egg, and then my husband, he was done, so now I'm well. It was a year, I remember, from the last from the last transfer until the idea of actually going through IVF all over again. I wailed, I cried, I was prostrate, I was angry, and the Lord was just getting me to a place of of obedience and peace and acceptance of, are you still going to obey me even without children? Are you still going to serve me even without children? And that's education in and of itself, is the spiritual part of it. And I knew, I read up on all the articles and things like that, but spiritually, I was devastated. And finally, and the Lord got me to that place of a piece of being like, okay, I'm not going to have any children. My husband said, let's try one more time. And I was like, what? Really? Oh, you sure? And we went through it again. And this time my perspective was a lot different. So with that said, it definitely allowed me to be able to educate myself more, and be able to know the risk factors, especially for a Black female, and then also know what questions to ask to the doctor. I feel like if I had have asked more questions regarding ectopic pregnancies after the first one, then maybe things would have been a little different for Black women. It's just a lot of those questions that weren't asked or even answered were now, after years of the, I would call it my drought, I could then ask more questions in. And then I had a new doctor too, so and she was much more accommodating for us. So yeah.
I like the fact earlier that you brought up about you mentioned there was a lot of journaling and counseling involved in that, and I think that's so important. And I just kind of want to mention with infant loss too, because that's something that you carry that with you. You know what I mean? And so even after, like for me, I have, children now, but I know on Mother's Day, I had to brace myself because at some point during that day, I'm going to have that thought. And it can, and those thoughts can come back at the most random times. And just being able to have the skills or just something that you can do to help you maneuver through that when it comes, because it was a loss. You know what I'm saying? And so I really think it's important to be able to know how to handle the emotional side of that. It is not typical. It's not normal. I say it's not in order for a parent to bury their children. You don't plan for that at all. When we're adults and we have aging parents, you think at some point, and it's an overwhelming thought to think about that, but you think at some point that would be something that you may have to do, but you don't ever think about having to do that for your kid. And so I remember I struggled with when people asked if we had kids before I actually had my daughters, but it was after the twins. Like, I don't know how to answer this question. I remember just really battling with it, because if I said no, I felt like I was denying them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But then if I said yes, now I have to go into this whole explanation about it. And so it's so much that goes into that. But I'll say again, I think that people around you, and for people who've experienced the loss of a pregnancy or of an infant, you got to give yourself grace. You got to give yourself grace and then get some help. Jesus and therapy go very good together.
Yeah, it does. And I would say about the therapy, during that time, and I guess transparency here. My husband and I, during the whole time, we were not only experiencing pregnancy loss, but we were having some marital problems, and we were still trying to navigate. Do I even like you?
Yeah.
Do I even love you enough to want to stay with you? Or and the Lord, through His grace and mercy, kept us together. But I was in therapy not just for the loss and the fertility issues, but I was in counseling too for how to be a better wife to my husband. I had to work on loving him and loving me, and me accepting who I was in Jesus Christ, to be a better wife, and not only that, to hopefully be a better mom, if that were in His plans. And so yes, I have a lovely journal of those years, and it allowed me to pin down those thoughts and not have them just caved in, because I needed somewhere to put them.
Yeah.
And so yes, therapy, although it's frowned upon a lot in our Black community, I feel like it's being more embraced now, as we are moving into more of a newer generation. But my husband is an older guy, and of course he too had therapy. But the older population is just go talk with God. Okay, I'm doing that, but I need to talk with someone about what can I do. I know that they too can help me out too, to figure out how to navigate. Because there were days that I just did not want to get up and go to work. I didn't want to go see those babies. And
God used people too.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can be in such an emotional place that God can speak through other people. to be able to get to you what you need.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's important to know too.
But I haven't experienced any miscarriages or ectopic pregnancy. But I do have embryos in the freezer.
Mm-hmm.
They are abnormal, and I'm very open because I've talked about it before. You know, when I had my baby, my uterus ruptured, but I can't bring myself to destroy those embryos because they're still mine. And every time I turn around, it's a letter. What you gonna do with these babies in the freezer? Y'all better catch me if you can. But like, I can't physically. I can't, in good faith, sign a paperwork and just say y'all destroyed them because it is a girl and a boy, and they mine,
and they're yours. You work. Not only did your body work hard to produce them, you went through a lot physically for them, and it's to me that's life through medical terms that the Lord has given us to be able to conceive. And my, like you say, I have one, and I just don't know what to do with it, but I'm not compelled to destroy it either. And that's another loss that we have to experience. If we decide to, it's not infancy, it's not pregnancy loss, but it's a loss nonetheless, because now you know once you destroy it, that's it.
That's it.
And that in and of itself is a grief.
It feels very final.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
my biggest thing that I just want people to know, especially in our community, is just do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But we can't carry all of this. When you have these types of experiences, you can't just carry it. You can't. It's not going to produce positively. You can't carry it. You have to be able to have a healthy outlet for it, and again, really just giving each other grace, because you never know what somebody's story is. Me and Eric have said before, anytime we've talked to a Black woman about this foundation, there's always some sort of story that she has. And they aren't all the same, but there's a story connected to it. So there are so many people that have had so many different experiences, and they're at different places in their journey of healing or whatever the case may be. So we really gotta give people grace. And give ourselves the same grace to make sure that we too get what we need to be able to move forward in a healthy way. So, Dr. Felicia, thank you so much for your strength, for your bravery, for just being willing to share your story so gracefully.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I'm just glad to be able to be here and hear it. And I'm happy for you.
Well, thank you. You too. And strength in numbers,
yes.
I tell you. So.
And I just appreciate you being willing to share.
Well, thank you. I'm more than, as I told Erica once before, I'm an open book when it comes to my fertility journey. So thank y'all for having me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, until next time, you all have a great one, and we'll see you next month.